of our forgiveness initiative. This is all part of our Beyond Betrayal program, where we're seeking to help you to understand the process to forgiving those who have caused hurt in your life. Forgiveness is a process, and keeping this fact in mind and knowing how to navigate this process can really go a long way to helping you on your journey to forgiveness. So we want to talk more about that today. We will be right back. Okay, a little bit of delay there, but that's just the way it is. It's amazing that any of this works. So, how are you guys doing? It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Doing good.
Yeah, I understand your lives are a little chaotic, but I do appreciate you taking some time to be with us this for this broadcast, and I just hope and trust that it will be a blessing to others. We're almost through with our series of broadcasts on forgiveness and the process that's associated with it. Years ago, I was working on this in conjunction with the curriculum that I was writing for some kids who were survivors of sex trafficking and abuse. And, I just really wanted to kind of like figure out a way to help them to move forward. And then what I realized is that, the same way that they move forward is the same way that we move forward when it comes to, forgiving others. And so that's what we want to talk about here today. And so let's go ahead and we'll take a look at our slides and see what we have here. So we're talking about forgiveness as a process. And we're on step 9 of our 10 steps to forgiveness. We started off on this journey with choose to forgive, then examine yourself, identify their offenses and your losses, feel your feelings, forgive all you can, share this experience with a trusted friend, ask God to help you with what you cannot forgive, be patient and give yourself grace, and realize that forgiveness is a process. So that's where we're at today. So let's just go ahead and kind of walk through this a little bit. So there's 2 sides to forgiveness. And keeping these in mind can help you along on your journey. The first side is choice. Forgiveness is a choice. It's not an emotion. So you can choose to forgive even if you're still sorting through your emotions about your hurt. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Actually, I had talked to somebody about forgiveness just the other day. They said, I'm trying to remember, that they could say yes, that they could forgive them, but they couldn't let it go. And
Yeah,
I thought, well, then that's not forgiveness,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah, I think that, anytime there's a yes, but, you know.
Yes. But I wonder, do most people handle it that way?
You
I
know,
don't know.
I really do think, okay, let's step back and think about this for a moment. Because in part of this, and I don't know how much Im, yeah, input you have into this person's life, but part of this is helping individuals to understand that really they're the ones who are going to benefit from forgiveness.
Right.
And so when you don't let it go, all you're doing is carrying it forward.
And that is, I brought that up because for myself, when I look at forgiveness, I think of how God has forgiven me.
Mm-hmm,
That's the
mm-hmm.
light that I look at it in. And He says that when He forgives me, it's as far as the east is from the west. It means
Yeah,
He doesn't look at me and and see that
Mm-hmm,
anymore,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that is my example for me, and that's the example that I use because it truly is. It sets you free.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Just like the other person isn't just scot free when you forgive that way. God
Mm-hmm.
still deals with them, but as far as you're concerned, that's where the healing is in you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I
Well, isn't
would
it a
go ahead.
process though? Like part of what
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about is that forgiveness is a process. So even if you
Mm-hmm.
say I forgive you, that doesn't mean I think it doesn't mean that you're not going to keep feeling those similar feelings though.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yes.
know, um, when I went through the Beyond Betrayal program with you, uh, we were you were talking about the needs to forgive, want to forgive, have forgiven part.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
would say, yeah, I have forgiven, I have forgiven, I have forgiven. But then it just kept
Mm-hmm.
like, every once in a while, bloop, bubble up again, and I feel those same feelings, and be in
Right.
that headspace all over again.
Yeah.
So I think that you kind of just have to keep forgiving sometimes because it's
Mm-hmm.
something that you're still dealing with.
I
Yeah, and
agree.
I think that would be good to leverage with your friend who is struggling. Is just say, okay, let's work with this. You have, you are willing to forgive. You've chosen to forgive, but you're still hanging on to some things. So
Mhm.
let's go ahead and kind of process that,
Mhm.
and or maybe just ask her. I assume it's a her, but just ask her that that are you interested in finding a way forward to kind of get this behind you?
Yep.
Because I really do believe that this is completely possible. I really do that
Oh, yeah.
that it's completely possible to live in freedom.
Yeah.
I'm living proof.
Yeah.
I love it. Yes, it works.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we all can testify, you know,
Absolutely.
that
Yes.
yeah, that it's um it does set you free, and otherwise, and my wife was the one that really she started me on this journey to rethinking my whole understanding of forgiveness because, and you've probably heard the story before, but I was counseling a couple whose daughter was murdered, and and I was kind of like trying to figure out the whole issue about should they forgive the killer.
Hmm.
you know by the way, I do believe that forgiveness and justice are completely compatible, and so
Yes.
ultimately where we landed on that is yes, you can forgive your daughter's killer and then go to every one of his parole hearings and argue that he should remain behind bars.
Hmm.
that's
Absolutely.
that's not those two are not you know
Contradicting.
yeah,
Right. Oh,
but
I agree.
yeah, but so I was really confused at that stage of my life about is that should we forgive all offenses. And my wife, she just asked a simple question. She says, well, what's your options?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I was thinking, it just stopped me cold. And I was thinking, well, what are my options? I can stay embittered, angry, resentful, hatred, vengeful, but none of those things are virtuous,
Right.
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's good.
but okay, let's go ahead and go back here to a moment. So the two sides of forgiveness is that one is that it's a choice, and the other is that it's a process. Forgiveness is a process, and from time to time, old feelings will bubble up. And remember that this is completely normal. This is just completely normal. That you're going to feel those feelings coming up from time to time. I know that that's been the case in my life. I assume that's been the case in your life.
Yep.
You know
Yep.
that
Maybe unless you're a robot.
yeah,
Right. That's right. Hmm.
yeah, you
Oh,
know,
it's true.
It's
it's
I can say
amazing.
very often I have to say, Lord, remind my soul.
yeah, 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 that actually brings us to our next slide. Thank you for that little segue there. And but so
Nope,
remind yourself of your choice.
that's right.
So whenever old feelings of anger and bitterness bubble up, remind yourself of your choice and remember your commitment to forgive. And here's a trick that I think that Satan likes to play on us. And I'm a believer in God and the Christian worldview, and that I believe that Satan is a reality. And I think that one of the tricks that he uses to confuse us about our choice that we've made to forgive somebody is those emotions will resurface.
Mm-hmm.
But those emotions do not invalidate your choice. You know,
Right.
that just because you're having a difficult day, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know. And,
I
the
agree.
people that are involved in our Beyond Betrayal group are people who have gone through, kind of like the price of admission.
It's true.
This is a group that nobody wants to belong to.
But
But
pretty much everybody does.
everybody has a mission.
Yeah, but everybody ends up in it,
It's true.
and so but not everybody gets to freedom, and that's really what I'm most interested in: is how do you get to freedom?
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
but,
Absolutely.
There's
but
this sermon
yeah,
that we heard a long time ago that says that when the devil reminds you, or wait, no, it's called finishing the devil's sentences. And
mm-hmm,
it's, the enemy speaks in half truths. And so when he's bringing up your emotions and things like that, as you got
mm-hmm,
to remind him why, okay, yeah, I am feeling that way, but I've chosen that I'm going to work towards a better path,
yeah,
And so
yeah,
um, kind of have to add the but to the
yeah,
enemy's
yeah,
Right.
lies and stuff.
yeah. Maybe that's when you can use the yes, but yes, that's true, absolutely. However,
That's
yes,
right.
but I've made a commitment, and
That's
Right.
so
right.
but here is the biggest lie about forgiveness, and that's just simply this: forgive and forget. You know, and what I tell people all the time, and I think that we are really confused about this, is that God doesn't even do that.
Mm-hmm.
How could he and remain God? Because God knows everything and he can't forget anything. You
Mm-hmm.
know, when people get confused because where the scriptures say that he will remember our sins no more, is what that means is that he's dropped the charges.
Right.
He's not going to bring them up in judgment. And so
Mm-hmm.
that the charges against us have been dropped when we accept the payment that he's offered, and that's through his son Christ.
Yeah.
So but coming back to this, is that the biggest lie about forgiveness is this idea of forgive and forget. And when you believe that, you're just setting yourself up for failure. Memories do not invalidate your commitment to forgive. So, and
But I know that with certain, I mean, I can look back at the things that were some things that were hard to forgive, and it was a process to work through it.
mm-hmm,
I haven't forgotten, but they're not in the forefront of my mind either.
Right.
I mean, it
Yeah.
has to be something brought up in order to
yeah,
discuss that again. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm,
I don't live there. I no
mm-hmm,
longer, that's not my home.
yeah,
Um, and that's where that freedom and wholeness and wellness, because
Mm-hmm.
that's when I can, if I can explain it to somebody, there's a well-being involved. It's a heart, mind, body, and soul that you experience this all encompassing wholeness, if that makes sense. And that is where I
Yeah,
would
perfect
urge
sense.
anybody to
Yeah.
want that, because that is absolute freedom from whatever that unforgiveness or it, because it holds you captive. You are in chains to that.
It is. It is. I mean, and you pay such a heavy price
Yep.
for it.
Yep.
And
And it's where Satan wants to keep you bound,
Right.
because then he can keep you from the goodness of God in
yeah,
that bondage. That's where this freedom, it is huge. It's huge.
yeah,
Life
yeah.
changing.
My wife is addicted to the TV series Blue Bloods. And so,
Yes.
and so she's watching that. Unfortunately, it's on one of those streaming platforms, and so she started with the first season, and I think she's up like maybe to season 5 or 6, and like I think there's like about 1 million of them, you know. So, and so, but uh, yesterday's, and you know, and sometimes I'm not a good person to watch TV with, is because is because you know you can see what's going on in the drama and where the person is going off track, and you know, and sometimes I feel like I need to make a little commentary on it. But yesterday she was watching a, a an episode where a woman the woman was about to get married, and she wanted the commissioner, you know, Tom Selleck, to give her away, type of thing. But somehow that the perpetrator who had murdered her family, you know, her family of origin, her mom, dad, and younger brother, and so her wedding day was completely. He reached out to her and he wanted to connect with her, and so on and so forth. And so she goes and she visits him in prison and all of this, and she is just spewing such, you know, hate, and she says, you know, if you really want to do what's right, then do me a favor and kill yourself and get it right this time, you know.
Mm-hmm.
and and I was thinking about it because and particularly when it's an egregious evil, you know, an over the top evil, is
Mm-hmm.
that someone does to us, is that evil done to us gives rise to evil within us,
Yes.
you know, and we
Yes.
get locked into that, you know, cycle of vengeance and revenge and all of that. And, you know, nobody escapes God's judgment. And that's part of the problem in our culture today, is that we, you know, we feel like we have to have a completely just society.
Mhm.
And I'm all for justice, but the fact of the matter is our courts and our human justice systems are always going to fail,
Right.
you know.
They will.
And
Yeah.
but but I don't want, and I don't ever want to be in a position where I have to forgive a big thing like that, you know.
Right.
But I don't want to be, you know. So let's say that this guy killed 4 of her family members. I don't want to be the 5th victim.
Right.
I don't want the rest of my life to be controlled by that perpetrator.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, I have to tell you a quick story. Like, none of my stories are that quick, but that is. This is many, many, many years ago. I was listening to a radio station when I lived in the Bay Area, and um, and and they were telling about a lady who was raped, and you know, I'm the type of guy who listens to all these uplifting shows. You know,
I can tell.
but, but they were talking about a lady who was raped, and then her offender gouged out her eyes
Mm-hmm.
so that she couldn't identify him in court. I mean, in any lineups or anything. And and yet she was this person who was just this inspirational person,
Mm-hmm.
in all of her dealings, and I think she might have been a motivational speaker or something like that. I can't remember all the details. I just do remember those, those graphic ones. But here's what she said. She said, "My perpetrator took one night of my life. It's up to me how many tomorrows I give him."
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
great outlook. Yes.
Yeah. You know.
Yes. And if we could live that way, I mean, forgiveness would be the first thing on our list,
Yeah.
because that is what that does. It sets you free and
Yeah.
able to, because that's the absolute perfect way to look at that.
Yeah. Unforgiveness, it just mortgages your future, is what it
It sure
does.
does.
You
It
know.
sure does.
You
Yep.
know. It robs you of your joy, your freedom, the peace
Yep.
of mind. You
Yep.
know.
Yep.
So,
It's
but
so true. Hmm.
okay, let's see if I can get these slides here. There we go. So here are a few tips that I've discovered on my journey. And number one is learn to quarantine your memories. I had to do this for myself. We can't stop ruminating about the offense, particularly when it's fresh. It is like a 24/7 thing that will drive you crazy. But we can quarantine where and when we will entertain those thoughts. So what I counsel people to do is to make certain spaces in your life off limits to rehearsing the hurt. So I had to get to the place where I said, "Okay, I'm not going to rehearse this in the shower," you know.
Hmm.
And then I had to get. I'm not going to rehearse this when I'm driving alone in my car,
Hmm.
and and kind of the last place to go was I'm not going to rehearse this when I'm out in the yard doing gardening, you know,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and that but um, so I had to quarantine certain places in my life where I said, "You are not welcome in the shower with me. Sorry."
It's true.
You
True. And
know?
I'll tell you, I know that I had mentioned it before, but I just shared it with my own daughter this afternoon. She came over after she had hurt her hand, and in that exact same thing, I said, what works for me is that Selah, and
Yeah,
and to say stop,
yeah,
because I can be very intense, and I know I'm very aware of that. But in that intensity, you make yourself insane, like what you're saying. You invite it into the
yeah,
shower, you invite it in your bed. It's just like it's this wow,
yeah,
And I mean, and I know who I am. Lord have mercy, nobody
yeah,
has to tell me I am one big exclamation point. And but if I can stop, just
yeah,
stop in
yeah.
Jesus' name, stop, and you know what? It has done wonders for me. And
Mm-hmm.
then to breathe, to, inhale and exhale, and then to lean into Him. And I physically lean in.
Mm,
And then I ask God, what do I do in this? And then
yeah,
hear Him. And it has changed my life. And
yeah,
I mean, I don't know, somebody needs to hear that, because
Yeah.
and it's when you take control of that and
mm-hmm.
you stop.
Yeah,
I don't even know. I don't know. It's a supernatural move. I'm telling you, because it's hard to stop me. Nobody else could do it, but from the
yeah,
inside. And I
yeah,
just do that. I pull that move on myself and take that massive pause. And my daughter was sitting here just minutes before we came on here, and I
mm-hmm.
said, I want you to try something. And I said, you tell yourself stop, because
Yeah,
you're spinning, girlfriend, and this isn't good. You know, and she did it, and she just looked at me, and she wrote me a text, and she just goes, Mom, you are awesome. But it's
that's good.
because I've learned the hard way. My goodness, you can spend years spinning in the mess,
Yeah.
because that's right where Satan wants you. He wants you to be a disaster.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh
he thinks
yeah.
it's cute and funny, but
Yeah.
and that's what, like what you were saying. Yes, this moment might be messed up. Somebody
Mhm.
may have taken this moment, or I may have given it away even.
Mm-hmm.
but you have to give the next. And that's
Yeah.
where you just stop the nonsense and get control. And when you do, you just breathe in Jesus. However it works for a person to take that in and lean
Mm-hmm.
in, because I'll tell you that's where your power's at.
Yeah.
It's in the Lord. And with that said, He's the healer. And I seriously come and can only do this, not just so that I hear myself talk, but because I really have a message from my mess. And
Yeah.
I still am crazy. I still am, can be just as ridiculously intense. But um,
Yeah.
yeah, God is doing a work, and it works.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
One of the things I picked up from you, Trina, is this no fishing sign.
Oh
Is
man, it
that
works.
and and what you have to do is you need to avoid visiting those places that are your old fishing holes,
You,
and and that includes checking out your offenders' social media accounts
you,
or their web pages, or even going to certain locales or driving by, that they can be triggers that impede your recovery.
The examples that we've had, even although, yes, they are traumatic events,
Mm-hmm.
is that those were like a singular event where some people are stuck in relationships where it's just like one thing after another after another. And so,
Mm-hmm.
that's even harder, I think, because then you're having to not just stop fishing in that same hole, but it's like there's a bunch of holes or something. I don't know what's a
Yeah.
way to make an
right.
analogy for that, but
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
um, you
You know,
know,
I have an analogy for that actually, as it hit me.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that are close relationships, a husband or wife. If in your marriage relationship, you live in the same house.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're not going to, we don't forget it. Those take a hurtful word. We've all had the message that our words matter. There's life and death in the power of the tongue. Well,
Mm-hmm.
um, I can do it, for instance, Jeremy and I have been married 28 years. And um, we had gone to, it's 2 years ago now, a really big marriage encounter
Yeah.
weekend. And they said, um, can you bring up that one thing that somebody said to you that
Hmm.
just hurt you? Man, it was instant. Boom, there it was, right? I knew what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, so they said, tonight when you get back to your room, I want you to, that elephant that's in the room, I want you to talk about that.
Hmm.
And it was something that it's not somewhere I wanted to go.
Yeah.
But as soon as I did, do you know that right now, I don't know what it was.
That's
mm,
wonderful. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that forgiveness, that I can't even pretend to try to find. I don't know.
Yeah.
And and it was because we remember hurtful words.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
and but if you can't, and I learned from that, talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something that you stick a no fishing sign. Deal with that before you stick the no fishing sign in that, right?
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, you're. Yeah. Yes.
Because,
yes,
because it will become a cesspool, I'm telling you, because that
Mm-hmm.
will always be that
Mm-hmm.
wound. It's a wound that will just abscess. And
mhm,
so with that, that would, I don't even know. I just thought of that when you said that, because there's those holes that happen,
Mm-hmm.
but they
Yeah.
need they need to be it needs to be. I encourage people, you need to talk to your husband about that.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest thing you've ever done, but it's going to be the best thing you've ever done.
Yeah.
Probably going to flip him sideways or whatever, that you're still hanging on to that, because you might not even remember that he did it.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Really. But those are things that, I highly, woo,
Mm-hmm.
don't
yeah,
let
Very.
that linger. You need to figure out a way to discuss that problem. And I know that it absolutely worked for
hmm
us. It was so healing, incredibly.
Mm-hmm.
You can move on.
The very
yeah,
best marriage counselor that I've ever um, worked with, he said, keep short lists. And so, we tend to accumulate those hurts. But if you deal with them when they come up, then they don't fester and, grow in your life. But when we're talking about going to these fishing holes, that it's a little bit different here, because sometimes you can go and dredge up. I was just talking with a client here recently who heard something about their offender, and so then they decided to go to their social media accounts, and and it is just going to fuel you. It fueled this client, and you will spiral out of control. I had to get to the place in my own life. I knew the danger of that, so I didn't go to any social media accounts or any websites, and I wouldn't even drive by the location, because I didn't want to get triggered in that space. Is that my peace of mind is more important than keeping up on the dirt. So, and that actually brings us to the next point that can be a practical tip to understand this process of forgiveness, is that you have to fire your reporters. And is that some people like to keep you informed of all the breaking news of your offenders, and you need to just let them know that you've moved on with your life and you're focused on other stories, rather than just inviting them to keep telling you the latest on to dish the latest dirt on what's going on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's probably also good to practice gratitude. Like, one of the things that when Matt and I were married early on, is that it was easy to keep a record of wrongs. And
yeah.
I was trying to think of, like, well, what would the opposite of that be? And so I actually got myself a little 3x5 spiral notebook, and I started keeping a record of rights. And I
Mm-hmm.
was so frustrated with him for so many things that it would take me like a while to think of something, and I would have to say, okay, he loaded the dishwasher today, and it would be like, something little, but I had to force myself to, like, stop looking past my hurt and look at, okay, he did this and that was good, and that's what I'm going to focus on,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
in those things, and I don't know about, I'm a woman, I don't know how men do things, but we would complain about that to a sister or
Mm-hmm.
friend,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just fuel to the fire too.
Yeah.
Rather
Yeah.
than, because one of the counseling things were, don't say anything bad about your husband to anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was really wisdom to me, because of how, as soon as it comes out of your mouth, if your words have power,
Yeah.
um, be very careful, because nobody else married him but you.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And of course,
And
we're not talking about tolerating abuse, or
exactly, yes,
and not
yes,
having healthy boundaries,
correct,
but
correct,
we're talking about accumulating these grievances,
right,
the
Mhm.
straws that
yes.
ultimately break the camel's back.
And
Right.
that is lined up with forgiveness, because I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's forgiving those closest to us, those are the big challenges too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Just
easier than
today.
dude I don't gotta see no more. I mean,
Yeah. Just today,
Well,
I
because
had to
you
make
care about them.
amends for
oh, see,
yeah, you know. So but that's what we have, And by the way, that's important to realize, is that we should give what we want to get, and
absolutely,
if we want to get if we want people to apologize when they're wrong, and to make amends for the hurt and harm that they've caused. But then we need to be that. And that's really an offense to my ego, you know. I mean, it
Oh
really is.
my. You mean live by example? Oh dear.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What a novel concept.
What a thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
Should have been
Yeah.
in the kitchen with my grandson and I today when I
Yeah.
walked in with an authoritative figure in his life today.
So, so, so remember that you can't stop memories from coming, but you can remember your commitment to forgive. Make certain spaces for rehearsing memories off limits. Avoid fishing holes and reassign your reporters to different beats or fire them all together, you know. And so that, I have to remind some folks in my life from time to time is that, you know, hey, I've moved on. You know,
Oh,
I'm not
yes.
interested in that story. You know,
Yep.
so
And a
Yeah.
lot of times it's those people closest. I have an oldest son who would like to just, I don't know why he wants to rake me over the coals all the time, but he's always bringing up, and I'm like, you know what?
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I've been forgiven. And so
yeah,
whether what
yeah,
you're saying is accurate or not, I just,
yeah,
no, you're right.
yeah,
Fire the reporters.
yeah. And you know, and here, and I like that attitude. And we're about out of time here, but I do want to just comment on that. Is that I like the attitude of essentially just taking ownership, you know, because Janice was just telling me the other day. She says, you know, that it's difficult when I meet with the kids and they talk about all the mistakes that I made as a parent. Well, you know, that is difficult, but why not just say, okay, yeah, that was difficult, and I'm sorry for that, you know, you know, and but and you know, and we all are going to make those mistakes,
Oh
but
my.
I don't want that to pollute my current relationship with you, you know.
Exactly.
So
Right. Right.
anything that you would like to say before we wrap up today?
Yeah, I have a closing thought.
Yeah. Okay.
It's, you know, spend some time reflecting on Jesus at the cross. You know, he
Mm-hmm.
says, "Forgive them, for they know not what they're doing." And I think
Yeah.
a lot of times, you know, the perpetrator behind all of it is not necessarily the person, but you know, they've been the enemy is going after them to get you into a
Mm-hmm.
place where it's gonna, you know, hurt you. But uh,
Yeah.
also, after Jesus came rose from the dead, he went back to Peter, who had
Yeah.
betrayed him 3 times, and said, you know, hey, do you love me? And
Mm-hmm.
reinstated him after that. So,
Yeah. Well,
uh,
you know, and it just dawned on me while you were talking about that. He didn't just go back to Peter.
yeah,
He went back to all of the people that betrayed him. Now,
right. Yeah.
here again, this calls for a heart of wisdom because, like I always say, it's best to keep a dangerous dog behind a high fence. And
Hmm.
so, some of the people who have betrayed you and hurt you are dangerous dogs, and you just
Yeah.
need to recognize that. If you stick your hand in the cage, then don't be surprised if you get bit. You know.
Hmm.
So.
Yeah.
But in forgiving situations like that, though,
Mm-hmm.
I find that it doesn't mean you're inviting them back for dinner, for crying out loud. I mean, I have forgiven people that I hope and pray I never see again unless they make it to heaven, you know?
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
and that's okay. That's
Yeah.
not that's wisdom, I'd say.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Like you said,
Yeah.
you know, you stick your
Mm-hmm.
hand through it, you're gonna get bit again. Well, don't be dumb. But
Yeah.
forgiving that, and that just means I'm not going to dwell on that negative thing that they brought
Hmm.
into my life anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because I
Yeah.
mean, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. I
Yeah.
mean, we're wise, we're very intelligent people, and
Mm-hmm.
but setting that, I'm just not. it's that same thing. Stick that no fishing sign in there. I'm not going to go back there
Mm-hmm.
and visit that or anything. But wisdom says you don't invite that back. You don't open the door and invite that back
Yeah.
in.
Oh
That's
yeah.
okay in those
Absolutely. Absolutely.
situations.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, ladies, stick around. I want to talk to you after we're off the air, but I want to just wrap this thing up, and I want to remind folks that this about our program, Beyond Betrayal, and really the tagline that we have for that is where life can be good again, and it really can be, and so I hope that you will experience that for yourself, because forgiveness is the only good path forward, and it's what sets wounded hearts free. And so I want to invite you to check out, the resources that we have at beyondbetrayal.org. But also I want to invite you to check out the resources on our Facebook group. That is beyondbetrayal.org. Make sure you go to the Facebook group beyondbetrayal.org. There's other ones that are on Facebook, but that's where you'll find us. And so that's it for now. And I hope you'll catch us for our last broadcast on this particular series. I got other ones that I'm cooking on right now. And so I'm looking forward to those and sharing those with you too. So that's it. We'll see you next time.